The research analyst at the financial derivatives company, Temitope Olubile, is here with us. Good morning, Temitope. Thanks for coming on the program.
Good morning, VC.
Well, let's take it up from where Mr. Adesoya left off. Now, I'm going to ask you, what's your view at the FDC about the whole OPEC Plus agreement and the output cuts?
Okay, so, I mean, the OPEC met 2 months after their meeting in April, and we saw that they extended the initial price cut instead of, because at their meeting in April they had already they had factored in that, okay, fine, from April to June we'll have 9.7 million barrels cut, and then we'll now reduce it to 7.7 million barrels per day. And so them maintaining the 9.7 as opposed to kickstarting the 7.7, it shows that maybe there are still some concerns about demand. On the demand side, as we see more economies opening up, there's that increased demand for oil, but there's still concerns, especially when you look to the health aspect of it all, as health officials warn about a second wave, so they are still being skeptical about, the demand side of things.
Now, is Nigeria really ready to compensate for the past?
I mean, yes, it's a question of if we're ready, but it's also a question of what happens if we don't, right? So you see that Saudi Arabia is, after their price war with Russia, they're not one to be played with, right? And as we saw in this meeting, the highlights of this meeting were countries that were non-compliant, right? And Nigeria was mentioned consistently among 3 other countries. So we can't afford the reputational damage, the revenue damage of, a sanction if worse comes to worse, from OPEC. So we need to comply. We need to, yes, there's the aspect of our oil revenue, the shocks to our oil revenue, but we've already had, we've had the shock from the price crash and everything. So we just have to comply if we don't want the damage that will come from a non-compliance.
One of the burning economic issues, as we can see there, is talking about external reserves in a zigzag mode now that we've seen, of course, shaping up to $36.55 billion, and then it slips again. So
yes.
Tell us what's fueling all of that.
I mean, just at the point where we were thinking that, okay, the decline in external reserves is gone, and now we are at the peak, especially as the IMF loan drawdown. But now we saw that we seem to have reached the peak of that, and we're back in the declining phase. And now, more so now, as we have the forex demand pressures, we're really hoping that external reserves will serve as as CBN pumps money into the forex market, the naira pressure would ease, right? So we see that now there's more pressure on the naira as a result of the shortage of our forex supply, and as more there's more demand, as airports we're hoping that it will be reopened by June 21. There is a pickup in forex demand, right? And with the shortage of the supply, we see that there's that pressure on the naira now, and especially now that the external reserves is on a decline. So we just really hope that the naira will stabilize, and we'll get more forex supply as the demand increases.
So what's the latest with the agricultural and domestic commodities?
Okay, so when we first of all started this whole pandemic, the lockdown restrictions, we saw that there was panic buying by consumers. There was even palliative buying by corporates, right? As part of like a corporate social responsibility. So we saw that demand. But now what we are seeing is that across the markets, there's this price discrimination that is happening. You see that the farther away markets are from the production point, the more expensive these commodities are. But this has been before even COVID-19, but now it's more manifest for all to see. So you see that there are lower prices in the Oyingbo Agege side, which is close to mile 12, which is where many of these commodities come from. But as you go further away from mile 12 and those markets, you see that as you come to the Sura side, Lagos, you see there is that increased price. There's an increase in price of commodities. So that's what we're seeing in the domestic market for now. And we also have the planting season has commenced for some of these commodities like tomatoes and pepper. So that's what's feeding into that. So you have logistics as a major problem right now for these markets, women, and that is really playing into prices, and we don't really need that. Our consumers do not need that because there's already the dwindling income. You see from the last MBS report, right, that over 40% of Nigerians have reported a job loss since COVID-19. More than 70% have reported dwindling disposable income. So the last thing consumers need, boring a hole in their pockets, is increased price of commodities.
Absolutely, Temitope. That would be a good point to leave this conversation. Research analyst at the financial derivatives company, Temitope Olubile. Thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.